This is the last part of our 5-part live workshop series where we cover each section of the ICA Global Commissioning Standard. In this workshop session, we cover 006 on-site testing, 007 handover, in-service, and closeout, 008 safety and risk management, and 009 lessons learned and continuous improvement. So this is a very important discussion to conclude your projects. Listen to this episode to learn how the ICA Global Commissioning Standard can help you and your project succeed at commissioning.
You're listening to the Industrial Commissioning Association podcast, where we discuss best practices for industrial plant process and energy system commissioning. Get ready to say no to outdated industry norms and say yes to improved project performance. Here's your host, Paul Turner.
Welcome to today's session. We're on our Industrial Commissioning Association Global Commissioning Standard. Today we've got a great presentation to go through the last part of the sections of the commissioning standard. This is ICA 006, 7, 8, and 9. These are the most important ones. These are the ones where true commissioning leaders are tested to see how your early advanced planning went and if you're ready to fully withstand the pressures of commissioning at the end of the project and execute to deliver on time and on budget. So if you haven't already, become a member of the Industrial Commissioning Association. You can join at the link here, icxa.net/join. You get access to the standard. You get access to several helpful resources, everything you need to be successful with commissioning. So definitely check that out, icxa.net/join, and you can become a member. Today, we're going to focus on the last 4 parts of the ICA commissioning standard, and we're actually going to wrap up our discussion on the standard today to go through parts 4 and parts 5 of our 5-part series here, because we've got lots of other topics we need to talk about for contractual implementation of commissioning, digitalization of commissioning, leadership for commissioning, project management for commissioning, strategy, standardization. There's lots of topics that we got to cover here. So watch your email. I'll be sending out some more invites on some of those topics so we can dive even deeper into what's required to be successful for commissioning. We're going to focus on the last parts of the standard. And this is really the moment of truth for commissioning leaders to see how you've planned commissioning and if you're actually ready. And this is what is needed really to lead projects with confidence and precision if you want to deliver your projects on time and on budget. So as I mentioned, this is part 4 of our 5-part series, and we're going to go through parts 4 and part 5 in this session to cover out ICA 006 on-site testing, as well as 7, 8, and 9 for handover, in-service, and closeout, safety and risk management, and lessons learned and continuous improvement. ICA 006 is really the moment of truth. After many years of the project and many months of planning for commissioning, it's time to see how your planning efforts have taken place and if that's successful for you to be able to prove yourself and deliver projects at the end. It's really a big question. Are you ready to execute commissioning with precision? And if you've done all the work in advance, then your on-site testing usually goes pretty smoothly. If you haven't done the advance work ahead of on-site testing, then that's what leads to chaos commissioning. This is really your true test as a commissioning leader to see if you've done well in your planning efforts to plan for commissioning. And like I said, if you've gone through zero effort or very poor planning, then you may be questioning your career decisions when you're in over your head and getting swamped by the fast pace of commissioning and not able to. So true commissioning leaders, they know that on-site testing is where the champions are truly made if planning for commissioning earlier in projects was successful. So we're going to break it down in what does it take to lead on-site testing like a true commissioning leader. So if you're not ready for on-site testing at the end, then these can be career-ending consequences where you just get completely overwhelmed by the fast pace of commissioning. You can't keep up. You can't keep your head above water. And there's lots on the line here, right? There's time is always very valuable on projects. There's lots of money on the line. And if you can't execute with precision, then projects can quickly fall apart at the end. There's no faking expertise. You need to know what you're doing at the end of projects for commissioning to be successful. The problem is that lots of project teams treat commissioning just as testing at the end of the project and somewhat treat it as an afterthought rather than setting projects up for success right from the beginning. ICA 006 is your roadmap on how to execute the on-site commissioning workflows that are required to properly manage commissioning. It aligns perfectly with digital workflows that would be used in a lot of the commissioning software that's out there, all of the documentation requirements that are required at each of the gated milestones through commissioning workflows, the precise contract execution in alignment with the very well-defined contracts we defined earlier in earlier sections of the ICA Global Commissioning Standard, all the safety protocols that are required, and all of the established communication channels so that everyone is communicating effectively for commissioning. So the first real hands-on stage of testing is called static commissioning. Some people may refer to this as pre-commissioning, but this is equipment level verification before we get into the system-wide testing of groups of equipment. Static commissioning is where we would be doing our instrumentation, calibration, and loop checks, ensuring that all signals are intact and that we're getting proper communications back to our HMI screens in the control room. Static commissioning is also where we're doing functional testing of individual pieces of equipment. So say a pump operating on its own to verify the performance of that pump, measuring 3 points on the pump curve and verifying the pump itself functions correctly. We're verifying safety and compliance checks. So if there's several interlocks or safety devices, we need to verify that these are functioning correctly before we move into dynamic commissioning. And then this would be the first milestone in our gated commissioning workflows to verify that all of our checklists are complete. This static commissioning is complete for this particular system, and the stakeholders sign off on that item saying it's released and ready for the next stage of testing, which is dynamic commissioning. So dynamic commissioning is where we're testing a group of equipment functioning together to perform an intended outcome of the system. This is proving that the components are integrated correctly together as a system. And this is where we test how everything works together on clean fluids before we move into the startup phase with introduction of process fluids or full plant loading of electrical systems. During dynamic commissioning, we're looking for system level functional tests. So no more isolated piece of equipment. Everything must work together as one plant process at a system level as we build up each of the systems. We're validating our control and automation systems. So our control narratives, our control logic, making sure that everything is functioning per the intended design and everything is being controlled. And that includes all normal operating conditions and fault operating conditions to make sure that all contingencies are functioning correctly too. We're taking a risk-based testing approach to mitigate risks so that when we go through startup of the plant, everything is safe and operable and ready for plant fluids and to operate for many years. This is also where we're performing any last punch list closeout items that are required. A, B, or C type punches. Certainly all A type punches need to be closed. B type punches we'll be working on concurrently as well during dynamic commissioning. We then move up into startup and performance verification. And this is the ultimate test. This is where plant processes are started for the first time with the introduction of process fluids or the introduction of full electrical loads to test the systems in their normal operating conditions and fault operating conditions in a real world environment to make sure that everything is functioning correctly. This is really the first true operational conditions that the facility will be experiencing, and we're proving the design intent because commissioning is really an engineering function, right? Several years before the systems were designed during detailed engineering phases and project engineering, commissioning is the other end of that to verify from an engineering perspective that systems are meeting the original design intent. Commissioning and front-end engineering are really the bookends that sandwich the construction activities in the middle, and both of those, design and commissioning, are important to make sure that what's being built actually functions as it needs to. So during startup, we'll be ramping up to full loads, slowly introducing plant process fluids or electrical loads as we ramp up to full loads. And we're monitoring the real-time performance. All of our important parameters are being measured to verify that the system is operating correctly as we continue to progress through plant startup. And this is where we'll then move into performance verification. This is verifying that the plant is operating per the original intended design intent. We may be modifying some of the settings to optimize performance of the system. That's taking place during performance verification to get the plant up and running and optimized to perfection for many years of operation. So some common mistakes that are encountered here is often there can be a fear of ownership, right? Commissioning is a big responsibility, and lots of people may prefer just to fill out the checklists and do what they're told. It can be somewhat challenging or intimidating to be the one that steps up and leads commissioning, because what if something goes wrong? Then you're held accountable for it. But that's why we've put together these resources. The ICA Global Commissioning Standard is to help you and have that map of how to proceed with a safe startup so that there are less things that go wrong, minimize the risks, and help you succeed in your commissioning roles. Sometimes on projects, it's left with a reactive mindset, right? Let's just see what happens. Let's just turn it on and see what happens. And that's not a good approach because it's unsafe, damage equipment, costly mistakes to project schedules. It's not a proactive approach to mitigate risk and make sure that things are going to go smoothly during startup. We want to avoid that reactive mindset. Lots of times there's a lack of documentation or a lack of a proper data management system. We may have our document management control processes, but we're missing real data management to manage the information from engineering and the information generated during commissioning to produce quality data on projects. Because if it's not documented, then it didn't really happen, right? For compliance reasons, we need to be documenting everything we're doing for commissioning to have the documentation as a backup to show how things were tested and that they do in fact comply to original plant requirements. Often during commissioning, there's a failure to align stakeholders, right? There's lots going on projects and everybody's scattered doing their own thing, but it's commissioning's role to bring everything back together into one workflow, into one plant process, and it can be challenging to align large stakeholder groups that are resisting or want to do their own thing or don't truly understand what commissioning is really all about. So it takes a lot of effort to make sure that owners, vendors, and contractors are all aligned and working towards the same goal and have all the same clear vision of what success looks like during commissioning. We've created all these resources at the Industrial Commissioning Association so that you're able to lead your commissioning with confidence. We've got all of the ICA document templates and checklists that you need so that you can pre-plan your on-site testing with success. Everything's there. You have a map you can follow with the ICA Commissioning Standard, download any of the document templates that you need. It's really commissioning kits, if you want to call it that, so that you can lead your projects to success. And the ICA Commissioning Standard is really that benchmark that you want to be evaluating your projects against, that global standard to make sure that you're implementing projects to the highest level possible and de-risking them for projects' success. We want to be able to have a reputation for delivering projects that work, right? When you look at the data that's out there, 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. That's not a good track record by the construction industry, and certainly not the reputation that you want to have on your projects. You want to follow a proven process to deliver projects on time and all budget, and you can get that with the ICA Commissioning Standard. So then moving into the next document in our series here for standard is ICA 007. So this is the ultimate goal, is to hand over functional and reliable system assets that can be used for decades of reliable operation for the life of the facilities. So handover, in-service, and closeout is an important document here on how are all these complex assets going to be handed over to the operating team, all the physical assets, all the documentation, everything that's needed by the operating team, including training, so that they're ready to go for smooth operation and maintenance of the plant facilities for many years to come. So this is the formal transfer from the project team to the operating team, where the responsibility for day-to-day activities of the plant assets are transitioned to the plant operating team. They need a whole host of documentation to be able to do their role. They need all the test results from commissioning. They need all the as-built drawings so they can troubleshoot assets if there's issues. They need operational procedures. So this whole aspect of operational readiness is very important to make sure that the plant operators are ready and prepared for operation and maintenance. During the last part of the project here for handover and closeout and in service, there'll be several punch list items that may be remaining. The process to close those out, how those are tracked and closed out, either tracked before in-service date or closed during warranty. All those issues need to be removed before the plant can be placed into service. Like I mentioned, training and competency is an important aspect as well. A lot of the plant operators won't be familiar with this new technology or new systems. They need to be familiar with what's required for operation of these complex facilities. They need to be familiar with how to maintain these assets so that the owner can get the most value out of the systems over the long run. And then commissioning closeout and archiving. Where is all of our documentation going to be placed? How is this going to be transferred into asset management systems? All of this is defined in ICA 007 so that plant operators get everything they need at the end of the project. Often after systems go in service, there's a period of performance monitoring. If there's clauses in the contract for performance guarantees, then systems and processes need to be put in place to gather that information over a few years for performance monitoring to determine things like performance guarantees, reliability targets, those types of items, so that if there's any penalties or awards in the contract due to performance monitoring or performance guarantees, those are all tracked and closed out in the contract. The next one is ICA 008. This is safety and risk management. So this is, of course, one of the more important documents because everything that we do during commissioning must be done safe. We want everyone at the end of the project to celebrate success, and there's several very strict safety processes that must be followed. The commissioning team is relied upon heavily to ensure that startups of plant processes are in fact safe. So this ICA 008 defines all of the commissioning specific safety processes that go into your HSSE plan, your project plan for safety. So for all of the aspects that are required for control of the work to manage risks, that includes all of your lockout, tagout, and permit to work processes, how those are all defined. Some of your earlier activities during design for HAZOP and SIMOPS identification of simultaneous tasks that may be taking place on site that present specific hazards, or any hazardous operations that need special consideration or special safe work procedures put in place to manage operation of those facilities. That's all defined in here. Your pre-startup and safety review processes, your PSSR processes, how to verify system readiness before proceeding with energization or startup of any of the systems. What does that PSSR process look like and how to implement that in the field? That's all defined in ICA 008. And then should anything go wrong, we always need plans in place in case. So that would be your emergency response planning to ensure that teams are prepared for incidents should something occur. The last part of our global commissioning standard is ICA 009. This is on lessons learned and continuous improvement. And I'm sure you've been part of a project that has gathered lessons learned. Lots of project teams are great at gathering lessons learned, but they're actually terrible at applying them on the next projects. Why do we gather these lessons learned and then put them on a shelf and then forget about them? ICA 009 is the document that defines more robust processes to put in place so that you're gathering these lessons learned and that you're actually applying them on the project that you're working on and on the next projects that follow. The only way to get better at this stuff and to improve project performance is to implement robust lessons learned processes on your projects so that incrementally each day, each project, each time that we're going through commissioning, processes are getting better and we're improving the maturity of commissioning on all projects. We really want to improve on future project success and building off the success of this project so the next one is even more successful. And this is done in a few ways. This is done by gathering lessons learned as you're going through your integration activities for commissioning and capturing these insights at each commissioning stage, not just at the end of the project, but at each of your gated milestones, going through a lessons learned process where if you learn in the lessons learned gathered at one gated milestone, you can apply those to the next one even on your same project. There's lots of data collection and documentation that's available on projects, but we often don't take advantage of this and use it to full advantage to apply lessons learned and improve productivity on projects. There's feedback loops that need to be created. So as we're gathering these lessons learned, establishing these feedback loops on projects and applying these lessons learned in a continuous process, this is how lessons learned are applied within the gated milestones on projects and within the overall larger project experience of when a project is finished, going back to the beginning of the next one and applying those lessons learned during feed processes so that we can learn and improve project performance. Really sophisticated organizations will develop develop performance metrics and benchmark a lot of their targets that need to be met on projects. This, of course, is often done for safety, but needs to apply to quality and system performance as well, so that all aspects of projects are continually improving. And one of the goals of the Industrial Commissioning Association is knowledge transfer. Our wise commissioning experts are retiring quite frequently, and this expertise is going out the door with them. One of the goals of the Industrial Commissioning Association is to gather this knowledge and have a place where people can learn from these experts before they retire, because knowledge transfer is important. 40 years of commissioning experience is certainly very valuable. We need to transfer that knowledge to the new people joining the industry so that they can learn and grow from others' experience and get a head start in their careers as they're starting out with commissioning. All right, so that's an overview of the last parts of the commissioning standard. Got some additional resources for you here as well. If you're going through the standard and you're noticing that there's aspects of the standard that aren't being implemented on your projects, then it may be beneficial for you to have commissioning project audit. This is where we'll go through your processes for your digital data management. What are your commissioning software strategies to gather data and apply lessons learned on projects? Review your commissioning strategy, maybe from an execution perspective or from a contractual perspective. What is your strategy to implement robust commissioning processes on projects? From a contract precision perspective, a lot of the projects we see that run into problems, they have a fundamental problem in their contract structure and definition of commissioning in contracts. So that's something you may need an audit on as well to make sure you're setting your projects up for success. And then, of course, standardization. Every other industry in the world has standardized on their processes and procedures, but the construction industry got left behind for some reason. When we standardize our commissioning processes, that's going to help us all excel and exceed what's needed on projects for better execution. So these are some of the things we can look at during a commissioning project audit. You can reach out to us at icxa.net/audit. We can help you implement a strategic commissioning framework, optimize commissioning execution, and ensure a seamless project handover. The second resource you might be interested in checking out is our commissioning leadership programs. We've got an intermediate leadership program and an advanced leadership program, and this gives you more than just the technical skills, because the technical skills alone will not get you to commissioning success. There's lots of other aspects that are required to manage commissioning when it comes to contracts, digitalization, your strategy, your project management, leadership, and planning. All of these aspects go into successful commissioning. And it's maybe just a question of where you want to be on projects. If you want to be the follower on projects that are filling out the checklists and doing the testing in the field, that's fine, because we need those roles on projects. But if you're looking to be the leader, the go-to expert to plan and execute project delivery, then this is for you to get all the aspects you need for commissioning success. And you can check that out at icxa.net/leadership. Here's some more resources too. If you haven't already gotten a copy of the commissioning standard, there's no cost to get it. You can go to icxa.net/join. That'll get you access to all 9 parts of the commissioning standard. You can get a copy and start applying that on your projects right away. We've also found that this shareable brochure is somewhat helpful if you're discussing with your project management the need for commissioning processes or a standardized approach. This shareable brochure is a good option to discuss with your project manager. You can get a copy at icxa.net/brochure. Use that as a starting point for discussions when talking to others. Show them what the standard is, how it works, and that will hopefully lead them to then go get the full standard and all 9 sections of the document. So check out those resources as well. That should hopefully help you out with some of your commissioning discussions too. All right, so the next workshop session, that should actually say March 26th. I've got some more great topics to discuss on commissioning. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, we need to get into even more depth on commissioning topics for contractual implementation of commissioning responsibility models and how to structure that in your contracts, digitalization of your commissioning processes in commissioning software. We've got lots of very detailed topics that we need to get into, and I'll be sending out those invites shortly for the next workshop session on March 26th. And by all means, if you have other topics that you think we need to cover, give me a suggestion, shoot them in the chat. I'll make sure that we cover the topics that you need to excel with commissioning. All right, first question here is, I believe static and dynamic commissioning is differing based on specific company standards. Some standards such as OPERCOM refers to static commissioning before permanent power to the equipment and mostly conducted on test bench within laboratory or workshop prior installation of the equipment. Yeah, and that's the problem, is there has never been one comprehensive standard that governs how to properly apply or standardize the commissioning process, right? What we found is there's lots of building commissioning information that's out there, but that's not necessarily all that helpful when it comes to more advanced industrial plant process commissioning. Because of that, then a lot of the big companies have had to develop their own commissioning processes. So yeah, for example, Total has developed their internal processes for OPERCOM, and BP and Shell and Siemens and ABB and all the big companies have developed their own commissioning processes. And what that means is it's become a very disjointed industry, right? Everybody's got their own unique, special way of doing commissioning using different terminology. And it's made it very difficult for people to move from one project to the next because you have to reinvent the wheel every project, right? It makes no sense. No other industry does that. And that's one of the things that prompted us to create the Industrial Commissioning Standard. Is for the first time, finally, there's a commissioning standard that you can use to follow when you're writing your contracts to align on a standardized approach for commissioning. It's not helpful when everybody's referring to static commissioning or pre-commissioning or pipe flushing or something different, right? It gets very confusing and complex, and you have to relearn everything again depending on what's in each contract. So now finally there's a commissioning standard that people can use when writing their contracts to align on a standardized process. And maybe, just maybe, over several years we could finally get to a standardized approach rather than the chaotic approach that's taken on projects right now. Yes, it's your toolbox. Absolutely. This is your toolbox that's required to use as the map through commissioning, starting right from the beginning of projects. So if you missed some of the earlier sessions we went through in the last few weeks, we talked about ICA 001, 2, 3. Those cover the commissioning process that's required right at the beginning of projects, during project concept and during project feed stages. And yes, this is your map that tells you how to govern and manage commissioning through all stages of the project. I think carbon intensity should be included in commissioning. What do you think? Carbon intensity. Yeah, for sure. I'm assuming you're referring to like a carbon capture type system, and any type of industrial plant process needs a commissioning process, project management approach to commissioning. And that's what the ICA Commissioning Standard provides to you. So absolutely, yep. Grab a copy of the ICA Commissioning Standard. It will definitely help you on your carbon projects. Most projects don't get delivered on time and within schedule for new technologies, always, it seems. For new technologies and for old technologies, the industry is very backwards. It's very much a construction-led process. And when you think about it, that's not the goal of projects, to install a bunch of equipment, right? The goal of projects is to have fully functional systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. If your main focus on your project is construction, then you're focusing on the wrong goal. The main goal of your project is successful commissioning. And you've maybe heard before, Bent Flivberg from the University of Oxford always refers to planning projects from right to left. If you've got your in-service date, then the first thing that's required to meet that in-service date is successful commissioning and startup. That needs to be your goal, right? In order for successful commissioning and startup, this is what's required from construction. In order for successful construction, this is what's required from design. Nobody does that. Everybody plans projects from left to right, and that's why most of them fail. But when you focus on the end goal of commissioning and make that a priority and give everybody a clear vision of what success looks like during commissioning, that keeps everybody focused on the real goal of the project rather than just focusing on construction and bolting a bunch of equipment to the floor that never ends up working correctly. Your project might seem like it's going well through design and through construction, but where things start to fall apart is when you're going through your integration activities during commissioning, and lo and behold, nothing works. Things are missing. There's lots of delays. And what seemed like your successful project for 80% of the project then falls apart and can become years late. So you need to focus on commissioning right from the start of projects and make that the fundamental goal of projects, to have everybody aligned on the real goal of projects. The lessons learned is one of the most precious things in a project. It absolutely is, because that's the opportunity for organizations to improve the maturity of their commissioning processes. The problem is, though, that, like I mentioned, project teams are great at gathering lessons learned, but terrible at applying lessons learned on the next project. So you have to actually learn from the lessons that you have on projects and not just gather them. And that's why feedback loops are so important, to make sure that you've got robust processes in place so that you're not only gathering lessons learned, but you're actually applying them on projects too. And with a structured approach to lessons learned and built-in systems, then this helps people working on projects manage their lessons learned and implement these lessons learned, rather than just creating a nice document and then forgetting about it. Should lessons learned shared before execution project by company or contractor? How to implement this? Can this put in delivered document? Absolutely. Yep. So ICA 007 or 9, the last document of the commissioning standard, explains exactly how to do that, how to document lessons learned and when to share lessons learned. So we would actually encourage right at the beginning of projects during the project kickoff, and then again during the commissioning kickoff meeting, there's an actual topic for lessons learned that are discussed. So how are lessons learned going to be managed on the project? Outlining that to all the project groups. How are lessons learned going to be gathered? How are they going to be applied on projects? What feedback loops are required? What lessons learned templates to use? What are the processes that are going to be followed? What are the meetings to include at each of your gated commissioning milestones? How are you actually going to implement lessons learned on your project? And when you outline that in some of your kickoff meetings right at the beginning of projects, that helps everyone understand how the project team is going to approach lessons learned and apply them on projects. So definitely check out that standard ICA 009, and that will help you put a framework in place that you can use to apply and implement lessons learned processes on your projects. It can often be the case that many companies don't want to share their lessons learned to other companies. Everybody thinks this is proprietary, secret knowledge. But you know what? Most projects, I would say all projects, are not unique, right? Unless you're building the James Webb Space Telescope that's never been done before, your project has been done before. Your project is not a unique special snowflake. LNG plants, power systems, substations, HVDC systems, these are systems that exist all over the world, and your project has been done before. So I'm not sure why everybody is so hesitant to share their lessons learned. We've actually created a repository for lessons learned inside the members area of the Industrial Commissioning Association. You can drop your lessons learned in there as well. You can gather some of the other projects' lessons learned that we've gathered over times. And it's pretty easy. Maybe you can't share any proprietary information. I understand that, but it's pretty easy to scrub documents of names and titles and project specific details. But those lessons learned are still very valuable to others working on a similar project. So for example, if you're working on a wastewater treatment plant project and you've got a set of lessons learned, take out the names, take out the specifics of the projects, take out sensitive things like IP addresses. Nobody cares about that. And upload your lessons learned to help others understand and learn, so that we can use this knowledge and expertise of others to help us on projects. I'm in this business for more than 30 years, and the last years mostly to do reviews. Bad to say, but you are correct. Most people do a lessons learned, but never take the lessons learned onwards. This to me is the reason why lessons learned do not work. Agree? Yes, without robust processes to actually implement the lessons learned, then it's a waste of time to gather them, right? We don't just want to gather lessons learned, we want to apply them on the next projects. And it takes strong project leaders to make that happen. If you just gather them and throw them on the shelf, then yeah, they get forgotten about and never used, and that's kind of a waste of time, right? I've seen projects do that, where they complete the next project very similar to the one they just created and make the same mistakes. It's a cultural problem for sure, but when you drive a culture of lessons learned and actually demand some of the benchmarking and key performance indicator increases on the next projects held accountable by leadership, then there are ways to make this work. I agree with you that it's not always the case, because often we're lacking that strong leader to drive the process. I would appreciate a session on pre-commissioning and commissioning QHSE considerations for safe commissioning execution. Yes, definitely check out our commissioning standard on safety and risk risk management. That document goes through all of the aspects for quality HSE. We actually call it HSSE, health, safety, security, and environment in the document. But that outlines all the processes that are required for pre-commissioning and commissioning, such as SIMOps, HAZOps, PSSR processes, control of work, lockout, tagout, PTW. Everything is in there. Have a read through that and let me know if you have any questions. If you do, then for sure we could arrange future discussion and we could go through some of the specifics of that. Good question. I think the only way to get it done is to stick your head above the field and take the lead. When you're in commissioning, you're not going to be the most loved person on site. Yes, sometimes the commissioning folks aren't necessarily the most popular because nobody likes being held accountable, right? If you're doing poor quality or poor construction or something not working and the commissioning guys are telling you that your work's wrong, well, people get sensitive and they don't necessarily want to hear that. But that's the reason that commissioning is there, is to hold people accountable, right? And make people perform their jobs and do great work. So it's definitely a balance and definitely a challenge. I've worked with some amazing people, some incredible commissioning teams that were an absolute pleasure to work with. So it depends on your approach, right? I think the technical aspects of commissioning are really just a small part of what's actually required for commissioning, right? All the people skills, all the communication skills, all the contractual planning at the beginning of projects. These are the things that will make commissioning successful. These are the things that true commissioning management leaders need at the beginning of projects so that the later technical commissioning aspects can be successful. And if you're only focusing on the technical, then you're missing out on a lot of the aspects that make commissioning successful. Lessons learned are very important, but companies doesn't take it very serious. And I think that's because there's just a lack of leadership or a lack of continuity between projects to make sure that lessons are applied on the next project, right? It's too often that the lessons learned are gathered and then everybody scatters on their own way and it's a different project team and nobody was even aware that the lessons learned even exist, or leadership doesn't actually know how to bridge that process and have lessons applied on the next project. So I agree with you that companies don't necessarily take it very serious, which is strange because this is to benefit companies, right? If we're learning and improving commissioning processes and improving the efficiency of completing projects, that's only going to help the company bottom line, right? But commissioning is unfortunately not very well understood and not very well applied on projects, and lessons learned are often missed and ignored, and it's costing companies significantly. What's the statistic says that right now the construction industry is a $13 trillion industry worldwide, and it's expected to nearly double by 2040 to like 22, 26 trillion dollars, something like that. There's just a massive amount of work ahead of us for electrification and climate initiatives, EV batteries, everything that's required to power and run our societies. And we're not going to get all that stuff built if we don't take this serious and improve commissioning on projects. Though there's wasted billions and trillions of dollars because people aren't taking commissioning seriously or lessons learned seriously. So we need to get better collectively as an industry if we're going to be able to tackle some of the global challenges that are ahead of us and complete this infrastructure needed for society. Any lessons learned must be moved to an action plan list in the management level. Absolutely. And that's where it falls apart, right? In the management level is because the technical, the working level, everybody's doing their best in documenting lessons learned and passing these up to management to put the right structures and processes in place for the next project. But it never happens, does it? That's where things fall apart. You're absolutely right. Is this ICA 008 section? Yes, 008, safety and risk management. I think that's the one that you're looking for there. That will have everything listed from a health and safety perspective. Go through that and have a look at what's in there and let me know if you have any questions. Mostly commissioning is a loved department after the project ends. Sometimes a lot of the groups have already left the project and it's just the poor commissioning guys left at the end there that have a whole bag of problems to fix. Sometimes commissioning doesn't necessarily get the respect that it deserves. But that's why we're here and have created the Industrial Commissioning Association, is to help people better understand commissioning and the value that it provides to projects and elevate the importance of commissioning so that all projects can succeed. Good point. I feel the understanding gaps. Absolutely. Yep. One of the problems that always shows up in lessons learned and always repeated again and again in every project is preservation. This will be highlight during pre-com and commissioning phase. It's often the case, isn't it? On mechanical projects, preservation is big deal, right? It requires close attention to make sure that construction groups are building and preserving and maintaining cleanliness so that commissioning can proceed uninhibited. You see lots of times where things aren't flushed properly or preserved properly, and the strangest things come out of flushing later, or flushing wasn't done, right? You start up a pump's not getting the flow rates that are required. You open it up and find the strangest things in the pipes, like a 5-gallon pail or a 2x4 or hard hats, lumber, sheets of plywood, anything, animals, snakes. There's the strangest things in there, right? And it's very important because if you're leaving this debris inside your process piping, your plant's never going to operate as it needs to, right? Flows are restricted and maybe issues aren't even discovered in the first few months of operation, but over years, things accumulate and pipes are clogged and then the plants aren't working. So you're right. Preservation isn't given enough attention that's needed on projects. When it comes to electrical projects, there's not so many mechanical systems. There might be smaller cooler systems, and preservation isn't quite as prevalent, say, in an electrical substation or HVDC substation. But a lot of the projects, I would say like 80% of the projects are mechanical projects with pipes, pumps, motors, valves. And preservation is a big deal to make sure that plant's going to start up correctly. Is there an ICXA chapter in Europe? There is a chapter in the UK. You're looking for the mainland Europe. We do have a Europe chapter lead, and I actually have a discussion with a very interesting individual from Italy later today looking to set up a local chapter in Italy. So we are branching out into Europe for sure. If you're interested in setting up any of the other countries' local chapters in there, we're certainly interested. If France, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, others are interested in setting up local chapters in Europe, we would be more than happy to have you. So please reach out and we can look at setting something like that up. When I was working with Bechtel, they take it in their website system, lessons learned. Anyone has experience with lessons learned, they add information in the website company. I think this should be captured by internal company website and not through emails. Yeah, definitely not through emails. We encourage people to share in our members area of the Industrial Commissioning Association to drop any lessons learned in there. Some people are sensitive to that type of information, so it's still good with a company like Bechtel that's doing that internally and allowing internal individuals to access those lessons learned processes. That's ideal as well to help share. We encourage, from the industrial commissioning standpoint, everybody sharing lessons learned, because commissioning is not well understood, and the more information we can share and help others succeed, then the better project's success will be. After 50 plus years, my perspective on lessons learned is the following. EPC providers are in business of selling man hours, so capturing of lessons learned is of no benefit to them because system completion is simply not their core skill set. From the owner-operator perspective, they do capture lessons learned, but unfortunately, these lessons learned are not utilized for project management, but rather to be applied to personnel appraisal. That's why they are locked down. I would take it even further that EPC contractors aren't necessarily interested in lessons learned. They're not interested in commissioning, period, because it doesn't benefit them. When you think about it, they're not going to benefit from the operational efficiencies or reliability of the project, right? They have no skin in the game. Once they're done the project, they're off to their next one. So they couldn't care if the systems ever work or not, right? The construction group is not the group that's going to solve this problem with commissioning, right? It's just not their incentive. It's not their interest. They're motivated with time and money in contracts. They're not motivated by quality, and quality is often not well enforced in projects, or reliability, those types of items. So I agree with your comment there for sure. Yes, we do have a local chapter in Norway. So James has recently set up a local chapter in Norway. Definitely reach out to him if you're in the Norway area and get involved, help us spread the message. We're looking for all aspects, all individuals to help grow and spread the commissioning message, because nobody on our own, not any one individual, is going to be able to take on this challenge of commissioning, right? We need to stick together and spread the message and work together as a commissioning community to help people better understand commissioning. Yeah, good to see you, James. Does commissioning fix or highlight the gaps for construction and ops to resolve? Starting a new role supporting a critical facilities commissioning inspection company, I need to know who addresses the shortfalls raised from the commissioning inspections. That's a good question. There's several steps in the commissioning process. At each of the gated milestones, it's going to depend on what the issues are discovered, right? So the first milestone is construction completion. That milestone, if there's any gaps in construction, then then the construction group needs to go fix those items before it passes through the construction completion milestone. Same with any of the static commissioning or dynamic commissioning milestones. If there's deficiencies that are noticed that are construction deficiencies, those are classified as A, B, or C type deficiencies that the construction group is then going to have to go back and resolve. Not so much for ops. We don't want to pass a whole host of issues to our operating teams. We want to deliver reliable systems to them. So all of the items that are noticed during the project for type A, B, and C type deficiencies need to be addressed by the project team. Sometimes if there's C-type deficiencies and it's agreed that operations may be in the best position to resolve those items, there can be an agreement made, but construction groups will have to go back and fix construction deficiencies, or if there's automation deficiencies, those types of things, those groups would be involved to fix those particular items. A big part of my challenge is the changing the construction mindset to include commissioning. This has been a great presentation and discussion. Thank you, Paul. Absolutely. Yep. And where that mindset shift starts is in contracts, because it is very tough to change people's mindset and they don't want to change their mindset. The construction industry is unfortunately a very lagging behind industry that has refused to adapt to the times and take on the efficiency gains that a lot of every other industry in the world has undertaken. People just love the way it's always been, right? So the only way you're sometimes going to be able to change that mindset is in contracts. When we look at any contract on large projects, they're usually pretty light on details for not only just the commissioning technical details, but the commissioning process as well. We need to be using contracts not only as a tool to start the project, but also as a tool to finish the project. And when you put in the upfront effort and write decent contracts, then everybody has a clear vision of what success looks like during commissioning, and everyone is aligned on the true goal of the projects, whether they like it or not, whether they have some screwed up mindset that doesn't align with commissioning. But when it's in the contract, then it's enforceable, right? If it's not in the contract, then it's not going to happen. So a big aspect in my mind of changing the construction mindset is to lead with commissioning, lead projects with commissioning right from the start, incorporate commissioning into all contracts documents, and then that's the guide, that's the enforceable map to guide projects to success. So my best advice is take the ICA Global Commissioning Standard and use that as a tool when you're writing your contracts. In the commissioning standard, it goes through the 8 aspects that must be included in construction contracts to align with commissioning in the end. And if you're missing even just one of those 8 items, then your project's already in trouble even before you award and sign that contract. So that's my best advice, is start right at the beginning and plan for commissioning success in contracts. I'm certainly interested in a chapter for the Netherlands. Let's get in touch. Absolutely. Reach out to us at info@icxa.net. You can email us and we'll get you hooked up in the Netherlands and be happy to have you on board. info@icxa.net, and we'll get in touch. Can you send me a document to guide us for the steps of how to write better lessons learned? Absolutely. Yeah. If you log into the members area of the Industrial Commissioning Association, then you can get access to the lessons learned standard. I'll put this one up here. Again, if you go to that right there, icxa.net/join, then that'll send you the login details. You can log in there and get access to all parts of the standard, including the lessons learned and how to structure that. So definitely check that one out. All right. Yes. If you haven't already, check out the Norway local chapter. There's the link. You can go to our website, icxa.net. All of our local chapters are listed there. If you'd like to set up a local chapter, absolutely, please reach out to any of the existing local chapter leads and get in touch and get involved in the commissioning community. I work from construction stage, then jump into commissioning team. I always push the importance of a strict cleaning, blowing, and drying very early on from the construction hydro testing. The way you're not going to lose time, often months of delays due to debris or water. Most prevalent in LNG projects when it comes to commissioning. It's fantastic when you've no delays. Absolutely, right? But it's all too common that everybody wants to kick the can down the road, right? Not my problem. Let the commissioning guys deal with it. We don't need to worry about flushing, cleaning, because we need to get on to our next job. Someone else will figure that out later. So I love your approach, Samuel. That's absolutely right, to enforce a strict cleaning and blowing and drying process so that there's no delays during commissioning. Hi from your local ICXA Southeast Florida. Hey, good to have you. Big challenges are for those managers in the origination and development that don't value the commissioning efforts and still think that it is about the last 2 weeks of the project. Yep, the last 2 weeks or last 2 months or even like 6 or 9 months on big projects. If you're going to ignore that last phase of projects at the beginning, then you're going to have a pretty tough time completing, right? Everything might seem like it's going great until you hit that last part of the project, and what should take 2 weeks takes 6 months or a year because it wasn't properly planned for. So definitely want to avoid that. My experience in the construction industry, only data center construction has taken serious importance to commissioning from design to lessons learned. I see that in some data centers, and then in others, not so much. I would say that I don't know if there's any industry that's truly mastered commissioning. From the projects that I've worked on, the best commissioning I've seen is in the aerospace industry, because when you're launching a satellite into space, it must work, right? You don't have a reset switch. So testing and commissioning and verification of those systems is meticulous, precise, and very, very high quality. And that was where I started my career in the first 10 years that I was working. Then when I went to the power industry, I did not see anything close to that level of quality being undertaken on our ground-based projects. And it was frustrating and appalling that everybody was just delaying things later and kicking the can down the road when I was used to much higher quality standards. And I could see where things were going wrong. I could see that issues weren't being dealt with, that problems were being kicked down the road later. Yeah, the aerospace industry I've seen has the highest quality standards. Then the industry that's kind of been the next leader after aerospace is the oil and gas industry, because there's lots of money involved and there's lots of logistics and safety hazards involved. So the oil and gas industry seems to be a little bit more advanced. But some of the other industries haven't gotten that sophisticated in commissioning yet. For the power industry, for data center industry might be kind of hit and miss on some of the big players that are repeatedly doing data center construction. I'm sure have gotten it down a science and an art to stamp out the various data centers. But lots of other industries, the wastewater treatment plant industry, the power industry, are not at the sophisticated levels that are required for leadership and commissioning. And that's why we're helping all industries succeed with commissioning by introducing the ICA Commissioning Standard to give everybody a map and a guide of what high quality standards look like for project success. So yep, appreciate your comment. Lots of good questions. I appreciate everyone's involvement. I appreciate all the questions, and good to see others from the commissioning community, and encourage you to definitely get involved. So definitely watch your email for our next session, same time next week. I think I'll be talking about commissioning responsibility models or project delivery strategies for commissioning. So that'll be a very in-depth and good topic. Definitely check that out. Check out the resources that are on the page here for commissioning project audit or leadership programs. Get a copy of the standard if you haven't already, and get our shareable brochure. All the links are right there. You can check them out. And I'll definitely hope to see you in a week from now at our next session. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. To become a member of the Industrial Commissioning Association, visit icxa.net. Members get access to commissioning standards, procurement specifications, commissioning training and certification, plus many more specialized resources to help you with commissioning of your industrial plant process and energy systems. Visit icxa.net for more information.